Hi everybody, I'm Andy the Vegani. Today, no food. Let's talk about some photography basics. In the last photography tutorial, I explained to you the exposure triangle of shutter speed, aperture and ISO and how you can use them to perfectly expose your image. If you haven't seen this tutorial, I'll put the link in the description box below. So today, let's talk about lighting setups. In this tutorial, I will show you 3 different lighting techniques, including natural and artificial light, that will help you make your photos look more professional. So, let's roll the intro. So, let's talk about lighting. In my opinion, lighting is the most crucial aspect to get a beautiful image, even more important than the type of camera you use. When the lighting is bad, even the best DSLR won't help you much. But with proper lighting, you can get amazing photos even with your smartphone. For shooting food, I have only one rule: never use a front-facing flash. Why? Because it makes the image look flat and you lose the three-dimensional structure. It's best to position your light source in an angle between 30 and 180 degrees to your camera in order to catch some nice structure of your food. The light source can be either natural or artificial, and I will show you how to make the most of them to get a professional looking photo. So the best light for shooting food is sunlight, as it creates the most pleasing look. However, it's best to avoid direct sunlight, as this creates some harsh shadows. Go with soft diffused sunlight in the morning or afternoon to get a more evenly lit image. When working with natural light, I prefer setting up my shot as close as possible to a window with a 90-degree angle between the light source and my camera, thus creating a three-dimensional structure. As you can see, the light spreads very evenly across the image, thereby creating a very natural look. Let's set up our scene. Today, I'll be shooting a smoothie bowl with some fruits as an example. Once you have the setup ready to go, frame your image with your camera and set your shutter speed, aperture and ISO to get a perfectly exposed image. I prefer shooting with a tripod, as it allows me to use a longer shutter speed and keep the ISO to a minimum, thus getting the best image quality. In order to avoid any shaking of the tripod while pressing the shutter, I use a remote shutter control. This helps to get a super crisp and sharp image. And there you go, an evenly lit smoothie bowl that looks just beautiful, don't you think? That's the easiest way to get a beautiful photo using natural light, but there are so many more options. It's best to just play around with natural light until you get the look you want to achieve. For example, I'm a huge fan of backlit shots. In order to get them, I simply turn my setup until the sunlight is behind my bowl and position the camera accordingly. As you can see, this setup creates a strong contrast between the fore and background. If you want to soften the contrast, just fill in the shadows. There are many options to do so, but the cheapest is just using a white styrofoam board like this. This styrofoam board acts as a small reflector, allowing you to precisely fill in the shadows. As you can see, I'm just playing around with the styrofoam board to get a perfect fill. If you place it too close to your subject, it starts to look unnatural and you get a massive reflection of the board. But if you move it away a little or hold it slightly angled, it looks much more pleasing. So here's a shot with and without the styrofoam board. As you can see, the shadows in the foreground are now not so dark anymore and the image looks more evenly lit. Another option, which honestly I hardly ever use, but still want to mention them, are reflectors. As you can see, the reflector is quite large and has a shiny surface that reflects light, and we can use those reflections to fill in the shadows. The reason why I hardly ever use it for shooting food is simply because it's just too big compared to my subjects, which are normally just some small bowls and plates. While it works nice for portraits, as you can see, the reflected light is just way too bright and widespread for the smoothie bowl. However, if you have a reflector like this, just play around, use different angles and positions to nicely fill in your shadows. As you can see, I was able to get a nice evenly lit shot with this reflector. But as you can also see, filling the shadows with the reflector results in less contrast. If that's what you're looking for, then reflectors might be a good choice. Alright, so if you can use natural light, always go for it. It's the cheapest and best way to get a professional and beautiful photo of your food. However, if you're like me, living in a country with 4 seasons, it can be quite difficult to get a good natural light in winter. If so, you might want to consider artificial light. The next best light source to sunlight is a softbox with a daylight lamp, like this one. This daylight lamp has the same color temperature as sunlight and will thus create a more natural look. Furthermore, the softbox usually contains a diffuser in front of the lamp that diffuses the light, which enhances the natural look. To even further enhance this natural look, I prefer to set up my softbox slightly angled from above. This gives some nice fill in the shadows on the opposite side. Also, as you can see, I've placed some black painted wooden boards around the smoothie bowl. These help in suppressing any unwanted reflections from the white wall behind my setup. So, once you're ready with your setup and your camera settings, you're ready to go. As you can see, the softbox creates a very natural look with some contrast, but the shadows aren't too dark. If you want to fill in the shadows, you can either use a white styrofoam board or reflectors as mentioned earlier. Or you can make use of the reflections from the walls, if they are white. So I just removed the wooden boards, and as you can see, this already is enough to get some nice shadow fill. I think it looks even more natural than with the boards. What do you think? Alright, so let's assume it's always dark outside, so you can't use natural light and you can't afford a softbox. Is there still a way to get a beautiful lit image without using the built-in flash? Yes, there is. Just use a normal lamp. I have this lamp from Auggie that has a very nice and warm indirect light. But if you just place the lamp right next to the bowl, the image won't look very pleasing at first. As you can see, it's extremely orange and the contrast between the right and the left side is very strong. The orange tone results from an incorrect white balance. This can easily be adjusted in most cameras and smartphones, or at least using an editing software. As you can see, if I adjust the white balance to the color temperature of the lamp, it starts to look much better. Next, let's deal with the strong contrast that results from the lamp standing right next to the bowl. Sunlight almost never comes directly from one side, but rather in a slight angle from above. In order to replicate that look, I just place the lamp on some books. And as you can see, this results in a more evenly lit image with a fill in the shadows on the left side. If you want to fill in those shadows even more, just play around with a reflector like this white styrofoam board until you get the look you want to achieve. As you can see, using the white styrofoam board, I was able to get some nice fill into the shadow of the bowl on the left side. Now that lamp already creates a beautiful diffused light, but let's just say you have a normal lamp with no diffuser. This light will look very harsh and unnatural. The best way is to diffuse it. For that, I prefer using something like this opaque plastic glass sheets. You can get these for less than $5 in a DIY store, and they are the perfect handy diffusers for every situation. I always use them when shooting glassware because, as you can see, even with indirect sunlight, the highlights are too strong. So if I just put the plastic glass sheet in between the sunlight and the glass, the light will be even more diffused, creating an evenly lit image with soft highlights. You can use the same technique when working with artificial light using a normal lamp. Just place the plastic sheet in between the lamp and your subject and it will result in a more evenly lit image due to the diffused light. What I also like about this thin plastic sheet is that you can bend it and therefore diffuse the light in different ways. As always, it's best to just play around and try different angles and positions to get the look you want to achieve. As you can see, positioning the lamp higher than your subject and using a diffuser and a styrofoam board creates a much more pleasing look than the original, that literally screams that it had been shot with a normal lamp. Alright, these are my tips for how to use different light sources to get a properly lit image. It's best to use natural light, but if for whatever reasons you can't, it's always good to know that you can replicate this natural look using artificial light sources. And I hope I was able to convince you that these artificial light sources don't have to be expensive in order to get a beautiful image. You just have to understand how natural light works in order to replicate it. So position your light source in a 30 to 180 degree angle to your camera, position your light source slightly angled from above to your subject, and diffuse your light source. Also, filling the shadows with a reflector helps to decrease the contrast. Alright, if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to know more about food photography, let me know in the comments below. And finally, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.